There it is. Hello and welcome everyone to our presentation. We are the Social Work Occupational Council, and we are an affiliate of the California chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. Our focus is to advocate for social work as an occupation. We have had previous presentations on workplace health and safety and workers' rights specific to social work issues. Also every June, and hopefully we'll do in this June, a presentation for new graduates on getting your first social work job. Changes slightly every year, but it is primarily about that. And we are here today to really shatter some stereotypes by we are honored to have some guests who are social workers, but with not so typical roles. And of course, we are always open to suggestions for future presentations. So do go ahead and contact us with that. This entire presentation is being recorded as it is right now and will be posted to our YouTube channel, and a link will go to our Facebook page. So do like and subscribe to our channel. All of our previous recorded presentations are there, and join our Facebook group if you like what you see. Also, given the overwhelming response to this presentation, likely we'll do something, one of these presentations in the future. So if you know someone that does atypical, quote unquote, atypical social work, please feel free to contact us. As for the format, we are scheduled to go to 7:30, but we'll see how it goes. We will give our guests equal time to speak and then open it up to questions. Do put your questions in the chat and we will get to as many of them as time permits. Thank you very much, everyone who are here. I understand there's a few from out of state, including out of the country. Thank you. We are honored to have you, and we are honored to have our panelists. Take it away, Claire.
All right, thank you so much. I am so excited to have you guys. My name is Clara Maradian. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Occupational Council. I reached out to you guys and you responded so quickly. I appreciate you. And I have your bios in front of me, but I don't want this presentation to be so formal that, you know, I'm going to be reading a bunch of stuff. You guys are all incredible, amazing people. If you want to introduce yourselves, please let me know. If you want me to introduce you, I had initially, I have all your bios in front of me, but if you would prefer to introduce yourself, please just go for it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, Jennifer.
All right, I go first. So my name is Jennifer Pelham. I live in the Bay Area. I'm in Emeryville, California, in the East Bay. And the first time I, drove over this bridge behind me, I was like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't believe it, because it's like such a movie moment. But I'm from New York. I'm not originally from California. But yes, I am so happy to be here. I really just honored to be with all of these speakers. So yeah, I've been a corporate social worker for 14 years. I'm currently a senior IT consultant, ProSci certified change practitioner at a very large healthcare organization. And I'm like, how am I a social worker that used to do HR and internal communications, and now I'm in IT? Well, it's because I have this love for collaboration and communication tools. Like I teach people how to make connections virtually. I have a really strong passion for employee engagement and for making the workplace better. And who better to do that than a social worker, right? So I am here for that, but I'm also here because my co-founder, Michelle, and we recently launched the Corporate Social Work Collective. We wanted to build a community and a place where others could learn about corporate social work too. So we launched, it hasn't even been a year yet. And just like you saw with the outpouring of interest for this session, we have been seeing this in our events and all of our, engagement. So great to be here. I love this topic.
Hi, this is Catherine. I can go next.
Go ahead.
Hi, so my name is Catherine Moore. I'm an LCSW based out of Southern California. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about, non-traditional social work roles. I am the founder of the RISE directory. It's new. We just launched in August 2021, and also the host of the Social Workers RISE podcast. And I started, a lot like a general or, the typical story that you hear when I first started out. And for a long time, I was working a low wage, low paid job. I had a really high stress load. My job took an emotional toll on me. I ended up burning out. I had low confidence coming out of grad school, just feeling like, oh my gosh, did I learn everything that I should have learned? I feel like I should be smarter by now after having a master's degree. It's impossible for your master's program to teach you everything that you're actually going to know or need to know in the field. And overall, I got to a point where I felt kind of discouraged and I needed additional support and special information that was specific to my role. Which is why I started the Social Workers RISE podcast, is to really, change these conversations and change these narratives and flip it from, expect to be burnt out to prepare to do so much self-care that you never get burnt out. So I'm trying to flip that narrative and also just provide immense support to clinical social workers and clinical supervisors. In talking with a lot of the clinical supervisors in the field, the number one area that came up was peer support and clinical consultation. We need this interaction. We need relationships. We need to be able to connect with other people to really be successful in our roles, in our jobs, to have the highest skills possible. So we need those relationships. And I'm just finding that it's more evident than ever. Which is why we created the RISE directory, which connects clinical supervisors to clinical social workers who are looking for their licensure hours. And it's more than a directory because we're also providing clinical consultation. We're also doing ongoing workshops to grow those business skills and those professional skills that we need, but we're not taught. And then also to just pour love into the clinical supervisors because they're really the foundation of our mental health services. And they're the ones who are really helping our next generation of clinical social workers grow. So that is me. I'm Catherine. I'm excited to be here.
I'll go
Catherine,
next.
and I know that on your podcast, you've done a similar to this event. You had folks talk about their transferable skills, and I love that episode.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If anybody hasn't listened to it, should go back.
Yeah, we're talking about all things non-traditional social work, traditional social work, just telling our stories.
That's great. Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Castro. I got my MSW back in 1995 at the University of Washington. I've always looked at social work as, to me, I guess, in a very non-traditional way. I did clinical work before I got my MSW. I worked in locked facilities, worked in residential care, outpatient, community health treatment, and I loved it. I love being a social worker. When I got my MSW, I focused on more public administration. It was essentially like an MBA for public administration. But I won't go into a lot of detail, but I think that what I found, right now I own a company called Facilitation Corps. We're an S corporation. And I'm actually looking at franchising it because I think that what we need right now, what the world needs right now, is really good facilitators. And I think social workers are amazing facilitators, and we, because of our systems level thinking, we can bring systems together, different sectors together for collaboration. And I'm finding that there's a lot of application to not only the nonprofit sector, the government sector, but also the private sector. For my company, I focus mostly on strategic planning. I do a lot of retreats. Just finished an equity framework for a funder. Just so I love the fact that just doing different things. I get bored once I master something, and I like just kind of learning new things. And so it's been a lot of fun. I live in Long Beach, California. I grew up in Northeast Los Angeles. I'm Latino, and I've been married to the same woman for 24 years. We're going to be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary in June. So it's really great to be on this panel. I was so excited to get this invitation because honestly, it's the first time in my entire career I've been invited to a forum like this. And as we could see, we need more forums like this to demonstrate to social workers that their competencies can be really marketed in a lot of different spheres. So nice to meet everybody.
My friend Alejandra.
I got so excited because I'm from Northeast LA. So, so I'm like,
Cypress
oh my
Park.
God, I'm from Cypress Park. Okay,
No
sorry.
way. Oh my God.
That's just part of my story and my narrative and like why I even went into social work. So hi everyone, my name is Alejandra Cortez, she, her, ella. And a little about me, I graduated from USC, hardcore macro social worker. I just have like a passion of like thinking systems and thinking big and healing communities, because like once we do that clinical work, but then if we're putting them back into these like environments that are not changing, then like we need to work collaboratively, right? But throughout my career, like I've loved blending in that clinical and macro, because I just think that combination of those two skills is what makes social work so powerful. So I pursued my LCSW after graduating. And so it was challenging for me just because I was doing that one-on-one, but then like my brain kept thinking like, but if we fix the school, this, and that. And then it was like, oh, stop, but you're the therapist. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. So it was, I was just always kind of born into doing that. And so currently I'm a program administrator at Children's Hospital Los Angeles with their substance use prevention and treatment program. And it's a very meso macro focus. So what I do is administer a federal grant where we're implementing and developing a youth leadership program in Northeast Los Angeles. So I'm very blessed that I get to work in the community I grew up in. And so it allows me that flexibility of applying my clinical skills, but also my meso and then macro with like policy work. And then I'm also the founder of The Social Changer, which came about with the frustration that as I was going through grad school, a lot of people are like, oh, are you going to snatch kids? Are you going to like be a therapist? And I was like, we do so much more. Like there's so much potential that social work can do, and highlighting that stigma that especially in the Latinx community there is about social work and what we're doing in communities that sometimes we cause harm versus like healing, right? And so it's really highlighting all of that typical work. And so through Social Changer, I share a lot of just like different ways that our skills can apply in different communities. I'm coaching social workers, doing trainings, workshops, speaking engagements, and like a real passion of like challenging that narrative of social work, of working with like either private sectors or organizations that like can benefit from social workers and they don't even know it, right? And so it's really working with like how we're applying to change those systems, kind of how like Renee was speaking. And so, yeah, like I can go on and on for hours about macro social work, just because I do have experience where I did like local government, nonprofit, and private sector throughout from like internship to today. So I'm excited to be here and seeing all other social workers that are also passionate about macro social workers. And so, yeah, I'll share my Instagram on the chat right now, but thank you.
Thank you guys. So I'm gonna start with the first
Real
question.
quick. If all of our panelists could post a link to their information on the chat, there was a lot of questions about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And I see questions coming in. I will get to them at the end. So thank you for those. All right. So I think the first question I have is, how has your social work degree and training prepared you for what you're doing now? And you know, whoever wants to start, or we can go in the same order.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking a lot, you know, about this, and I think that sometimes I would forget all my amazing social work skills that I learned. I'm like, doesn't everybody know this stuff about people? And I'm like, no, wait, like this is what we learn. This is, you know, our superpower, as one of our members likes to say. So, you know, I use my social work skills every day. I have like this people lens, and, you know, I am able to think about the impact on the individual, the system, the organization, like strengths perspective, right? SWOT analysis, like these are skills that transfer so well into the corporate world. And I think really what drives me as a social worker, you know, it's my value of improving people's lives, right? It's not just the job that I do and, you know, I show up, I do my tasks, my projects, but we spend so much time at work, right? And it has such a huge impact on our well-being, on our families, our lives. So as my, you know, one of my heroes, Adam Grant, says, like, I want to make work not suck. And so in my, you know, journey as a corporate social work, everything I have done has been about like just improving our work life. And so I feel like that's my mission. And, you know, again, who better to do that than a social worker?
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, I can go next on that. I think, well, first of all, throughout my career, even if I've done really different things, I mean, like many on the panel, I've worked in city government. You know, I've run my own nonprofits. I was a director for a while, but regardless of what I do, I always identify myself as a social worker first. So I'll be at a party. What do you do? I'm a social worker, and I'm also an adjunct professor. But it's because what binds us is the values, right? Our code of ethics, and so that's one thing that I feel like no matter what you do, if you cut hair, if you run a gym, you know, if you have an awesome community garden that you run, as long as you abide by the values of social work, to me, and you identify those values, you're a social worker. So going to the question, there are a lot of marketable skills for social workers. Of course, with the master's degree, the research, evidence-based practice, grant writing, consultation, as Jennifer was saying. I do a lot of SWOT analysis, strategic planning, logic models, a lot of that. But I think because a lot of us, we have clinical training as well, you can always tell the social workers at the table because we're good listeners. So we're always listening on several different levels, right? We're listening for not only the content, but we're also, because of our clinical training, we're interpreting, you know, the needs, motivation, the core. And then of course, with trauma-informed practice, we come with that perspective as well. So there's so many different things that I think we bring to the table that bring a different insight. And I think a lot of organizations in the private sector and nonprofits are looking for those kind of skills, those kind of emotional competencies.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Renee.
This is Catherine. I can go next. Definitely the skills that you learned in your social work degree that I see that have helped me the most is, one, I'm always learning. There's always room to grow. And with any new venture, it's going to be awkward. There's going to be growing pains. And so just being humble and open to learning goes a long, long way. Building on that empathy, you understand people, you understand the systems that the people are in. And when you have those two together, that's really where the magic happens, because you're able to talk with the people within the systems and also satisfy, you know, what it is that you need to get done within the systems to make it work. So that's what I would say is just always keep learning. The empathy and our systems perspective go a long way.
And I think feeding off of what everybody was kind of saying, I think the social work degree is so multifaceted that you can apply things like, so for me, like, it's really prepared me to understand people, like the mental health, right? And feelings and emotions and how to communicate efficiently. And those skills translate anywhere that you apply it to. Especially thinking whether it's systems, whether it's evaluation, assessment, goal setting, right? These are things that humans need to thrive. And I think right now, especially, it's like such a prime time for like us to go into different settings just because of all this trauma that we've lived collectively, that like our skills are so needed elsewhere. So I think it's trained us to learn how to pivot and market ourselves so that we can take advantage of the moment and see that we know the value of social work, but that others can see it too.
Great.
Thank you. All right, someone asked that I put in the questions in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and do that for the second question. Thanks for that tip. Appreciate it. All right, so this question is, why is it important for social workers to expand their idea of what roles and settings they could or should work in? And I would really also love if you can incorporate some titles of and settings and names, and so that our guests can have an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about different settings.
Should we keep going in the same order?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, so I have had a lot of different roles. I had a few traditional jobs. I started out a program director, case manager, therapist, and then I moved into corporate HR, and I was in career development. I was a social learning consultant. I was a HR program manager, a project manager. I did internal communications, like workforce enablement, employee engagement. There's all of these, I never applied for a corporate social worker job. So you're not going to find those. But change management is a really good field for social workers. I always like to tell people, like, as a social worker, we come alongside of an individual during a vulnerable time of change. But as a change practitioner, a change management person, like, I come alongside of an organization during a vulnerable change in their history, in their lives too. So it's very similar work, just at a very macro level. But yeah, we can do so much, and we kind of, I think, sell ourselves short, and especially with the media portrayals of what a social work is. I get so frustrated when I see on TV or movies and social workers. I don't want burnout and stress to be the story that we tell as social workers. There's so much more opportunity.
I can go next. This is Catherine. The thing that I see most is a lot of times people find that their first or couple jobs right out of grad school or right out of their BSW, they're really hard. A lot of times we give the most challenging jobs to the people who are newest to the field, and they're really, really hard. So it's not in your head that this is hard or that there's no easy solution, because it really is hard. There really is no easy solution. And you can become kind of worn down or experience that moral distress over time, because you're realizing you got into this field to make a change, to help people. And now you're seeing how broken the systems are, how there's good people within the systems, but they're just not designed to really help everybody. You can't do that. And so I think it's so important that we really expand our thinking of what we're capable of, because if we see these problems, if we see these gaps in the systems, then we know the solutions. We know what needs to be happening in order to fix these problems, to help people more efficiently. So, one job title would be entrepreneur. start your own organization, start your own nonprofit to really focus in on one need that you see that people are missing, that they're not being served. So that's why it's so important, because once we realize that we're not stuck to these traditional roles, if you love it, great. If not, then go, be free, pursue your passion, do what lights you up, do what really gets you excited to go to work, gets you in your zone to where you're helping people and you're really being 100% you. So that would be what I would say is don't limit yourself, because there's people who need you, and there's people who need you to show up in only ways that you can.
Alejandra, you want to go next? All right, good. Okay.
Okay, so for me, I think it's that we put ourselves in this box, right? Either we're clinical or we're macro, and then that's it. And then it's just like you're either getting your license or you're doing like struggling case management and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the times that I see is that people that are going to social work programs come with diverse experiences and passions, right? And then somewhere along the line, like it gets lost. And so I'll give an example of, like, for example, sports, right? Like people love sports, and well, I love sports. And so let's just say that like people have a background of like, I was a coach, like I used to play baseball, I used to do this kind of stuff. And then through life experiences, they decide to get an MSW, and then they lose that like sense of like, oh, like I can't do this kind of stuff because I'm doing therapy or whatever narrow idea we have that social work can do, right? But I think it's hard to identify like different titles and different programs, because you have to follow what you're passionate about. Like if you're into sports, like how am I mixing my social work skills into sports? Like right now, like y'all, like athletes have trauma, athletes have mental health. Like what teams need help, right? Like, you know, they just hired the Raiders, like an NFL, like their own clinician and things like that, right? Do you love Disney? Like, how can I apply my skills into working for Disney? And like, right? Do like the park staff need mental health? Do they need a therapist? Do they need to solve problems? Right? Keywords like wellness expert, right? Like, hello, like we know how to do these things. And so it's just, how am I applying the skills that I have and find what I want to do, and then just like transfer those skills, right? So it's finding that. Someone today on Instagram was like talking about nature kind of therapy social worker, like a nature social work, right? Like if it doesn't exist, I'm going to create it, right? Am I doing therapy walking around? Am I using plants and healing and merging it into that? So I think it's, and identifying that sometimes one job won't fulfill all your needs either, right? Like it can be volunteering, it can be something else to fulfill, because social workers are so passionate about like multi things that they want like that one job to fulfill all those needs, right? Like even when I was doing clinical, I was struggling because I love doing macro social work. And that's where my business started, that entrepreneur side, because it was filling that macro need while I was doing clinical. So I think it's understanding where that joy is coming from. And if it's something that's merging both social work and other passions that you'll have, you'll find avenues to find those non-traditional social work positions.
That's great. Thanks, Alejandra. So a couple of things that Ciclara asked for was just what kinds of titles are out there. I mean, so it's like Jennifer mentioned, you know, community engagement, community development. There's a lot of jobs within community development, both in housing, a number of different, of course, HR. There's a huge market right now for diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And of course, a lot of our training is in that. Organization development, change management, transitions management, which is kind of a new area. You can look it up, work at William Bridges. Coaching, of course. I don't like coaching, to me personally, because it feels too much like clinical work, and I don't like to do clinical work. So I think, you know, a lot of times I teach macro practice, and what I show my students immediately is we go to the websites and we look at these jobs, and they pay really well. And I hope that some of you notice that I'm close to 60, so I'm the veteran of the group here, but I still love being a social worker. And one of the things I love is that I've never felt burnt out. And it's because I've always kind of followed my own path. So I really want to accent what Catherine said in terms of being entrepreneurial. So it doesn't mean you have to start your own company, but it means that you are continually exploring your own interest and refining your own passion. So for me, I knew I was good at facilitation back in 1988, working in a locked facility, facilitating adults with severe and persistent mental illness. That was in 1988. And I knew I was really good at it. And I just followed that niche throughout my career. And that's what it's been about, is just loving to bring people together and listen. So I think I agree with the panel. It's kind of like just exploring those different passions that you have and thinking about maybe how they can be monetized. I hate to use that word, but how they can be monetized within a different environments.
I want to follow up on everything everyone's been saying. One of the thoughts I had in bringing, for the council to bring this panel together is this idea that social work is a framework and it is a value system, and that's what you're bringing in to settings and job titles, right? So as a social worker, you're not a job, you are a framework, and you are a thought process and a value system. And so you can take that anywhere. Like think about any single company that you are really excited about, right? Like, I don't know, somebody might say like, oh, TikTok, right? Community engagement, they're looking for folks to do community engagement. They're looking for folks to do wellness, a wellness officer, because a lot of people are burning out, right? So how can you bring the social work framework to TikTok? And that's really the idea that I hope that folks can walk away from, is that it's really not about a job title, it's about this value system that we have and we bring. All right. And
I wanted to add, if I could, there, that I think it's, at least for me, I picked this up from the panel as well. It's about finding your personal mission. So there were a couple of questions in the chat about working for large companies, things like that. I mean, that to me is not as constructive as a way to search it, right? Immediately going for the big companies, Google, things like that. I think it's that will come if that's what you want. But I think it's really most important, especially right after you get your MSW, is just exploring, finding really good mentors for at least the first 5 years, finding somebody that really believes in you. And I still have my mentors even at 58. But it's really about honing in on what your passions are and what your particular skill set is. And then you can apply that to a variety of sectors. So anyway, just want to put that out there.
that's also an antidote to burnout, is when you have a mission statement and when you have a strong sense of your values and mission, and that carries you through the ebbs and flows of the work.
Mm-hmm. And when you're using your strengths, like I'm a big fan of the Clifton Strengths Finder. Like, they say that people who are using their strengths are more engaged, are happier at work. People who have friends at work, there's so many wonderful things to do to try to, prevent that burnout. So.
One thing I will say that I've struggled with is I'm a change agent wherever I go. And that's why I finally just started my own business, because I can't stop trying to change organizations. Anyway, that's the downside, but I think, I don't know, I've enjoyed it.
All right, so the next question I'm going to put in the chat. How do non-social service companies benefit from the social work perspective, and how should social workers demonstrate the value they bring to the table? So there's a two-part.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of was the diversity of thought is such a need. I mean, I think for, corporations are hungry for social workers, and maybe they don't even know it yet. But, so if you have an HR department, right, and if everybody went to, human resources school or business school, it's like, it's just very much a group think. And so we need to have other types of educational backgrounds, other types of thinking. Framework, I think, is a wonderful way to put it. We have like these abstract skills that are sometimes really hard to pinpoint, but they need this diversity of thought. And I've been, told multiple times, like, oh, wow, we love your fresh perspective. And yeah, it's because I'm not coming at it from the business perspective or the technology. I'm coming at it from the people perspective, so I'm like, oh, I'm putting the human back in human resources, for sure. So yeah, and we have to be, proud to be a social worker and to label ourselves on LinkedIn as social workers, and, show off our credentials as social workers, and no matter what types of jobs. At the collective, we've had the opportunity of, meeting finance people and recruiters and, all people from all different backgrounds at tech companies. And it's like, let's just, tell the world that we're social workers, and, they will see the value when they can see how amazing we are to get that job done.
Yeah, one of the things that, go ahead. One of the things that surprised me is how many social workers are kind of hiding in plain sight. Like, I was talking to a senior program officer at a large foundation, and I never knew he had an MSW, and I was like, why aren't you a field instructor? And he goes, oh, well, I'm not really doing social work. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you control millions of dollars. Like, we need you to be supervising a social worker. So now I totally forgot that. How does so I have trouble with the question, non-social service company. So this is a great book by Patrick Lencioni called The Advantage, which I'd recommend. So read literature from outside social work too, and you'll see a lot of dovetailing. But so Lencioni would answer that question saying that obviously private for-profit companies, their bottom line is profit, but all companies strive to be good community partners. So I think that there's a false kind of dichotomy there, that there are organizations that are non-social service. All social service all companies have some sort of corporate social responsibility, and I think that's where social workers can play a role. But the question is, so from what perspective, how should we demonstrate the value? I think we demonstrate the value by being good listeners, as what was said before, being empathic, as Jennifer said, showing our strengths, asking questions that maybe aren't asked, and then holding companies accountable to the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. It was one company I worked at, it was a young social worker who told me, like, we needed to be doing more. And I ended up taking that to senior management. So I think it's just continually asking those questions. And then, like Alejandra, celebrating your story, where you came from. That's just remarkable. And I think the reason why many people are burning out right now is because a lot of companies aren't celebrating our unique identities, our unique stories, and creating environments that are nurturing.
And I'd add to that, we bring a tremendous amount of empathy to any setting that we go to. And there was an article by Forbes, I'll share it in the chat, just talking about how having empathy really adds to the culture, the retention. It inspires innovation among staff members, among employees. It increases their engagement within their work. It provides retention. So when you have an empathetic leader, you're more likely to be able to keep your employees, and people are more feel more included. So there's a higher rate of inclusivity and also a greater work-life balance for the employees. So like Renee said, so we're not getting burnt out as much when we have this higher level of empathy. And also, you know, having a high emotional intelligence, that is a really in-demand skill for that we kind of take it for granted. I watched a emotional intelligence training and I thought, oh my gosh, I learned this like 5-10 years ago. And corporations are still saying like, oh, so if we're nice and kind and empathetic to people, then we'll have more customer service. Wow, that's amazing. So it's just not, we take it for granted in our field, but like they said, it's in very high demand outside of our, you know, in the quote, non-traditional settings. And then if you want to be able to communicate your value, you need to know the terms that they're using. So their terminology is going to be slightly different than ours. But if you read the job postings, then be able to speak to that language, start where the client is, right? So speak to that language, try to use, you know, I'm sure Renee and other people would be able to provide more examples like Jennifer about specific ways that we can translate our social work skills into, you know, what it means to be in corporate. So, because there is a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, the business acumen. Yep. Our next event is going to be all about that. Shameless plug.
Yeah, and I think, okay, I'm not going to repeat everybody what we already know, right? That we're valuable. We know what we bring to the table. But I think where there's that disconnect is like, do we believe that we can fill those needs that those companies are, right? And so I'm kind of switching up the question a little bit, because once we believe that we can meet the need that the company is, it's how are we believing and changing their opinion. And so it's a lot of that education, making us kind of like Renee said, right? Like these like low-key social workers that are not saying that they're social workers. And even within the profession, not believing that non-traditional social workers are no longer social workers. Like they'll just say like, I'm not a social worker anymore. I'm like, how? Like how is that? Like, how do you detach it like that, right? And even like when, and this, I'm not talking bad, but like when Suzanne Dork-Peck donated like $2 million, right, to rename the USC school, people were like, she's not a real social worker because she made her money in real estate. And I was like, how is that different? Like she used her social work skills to, you know, make her money in real estate, right? And so I think it's a lot of that education, finding those jobs, translating those skill sets, and then how are we showing up to prove to them that they're we're filling that need. One, I was like looking for jobs, like I was looking for non-traditional, and I was interviewing for like this financial company, and they looked at my resume and they're like, this is a social work resume, like we're not sure we need a resume. And like they carried heavy client caseloads and worked with their financial like groups and clients about like how they're managing their money and like making sure that the company was meeting their clients' needs and that kind of stuff. And as I was having this discussion, they're like, oh, we never realized that we actually do need a social worker. And so that's where that disconnect is like how we're communicating that. And so it isn't until as collectively like schools encourage students of like how we're managing our skill sets and applying them elsewhere that we'll be able to convince then other organizations and non-traditional settings that we have those skill sets. So it's a twofold. Like I think it's that belief that we can't do it, and then once we have that switch, then it's easier to kind of apply these skills elsewhere once you find them. And I'm not saying it's easy, right? It's not like a one formula all, especially when there's so many different fields that we can go into. So it's doing your research and like even reaching out to people that are in those companies, right, on LinkedIn, like doing like an informal like interview and asking what is it that they do, so then that you know how to market yourself and do that connection so that you know what they need and that you can offer it and bring it to the table.
And I'm gonna do a promotion for you. You do resumes and one-on-one coaching, so folks can reach out.
So I do individual one-on-one and social work month. Y'all are gonna get more things because, like I said, I can always go off about macro and like how we're catering that individual passion because I know there's not like a one-tell-all formula. So yes, I do that. So yes.
All right. So I'm gonna move on to the next question because we have a lot of questions from the from the
A lot
attendees.
of questions on the
A
chat.
lot of the questions in the chat, and I'm like doing my best to, write them all down. But so we're going to go through just a couple more questions that I have, and then we'll get to the questions that folks have. All right, so what's your vision for social work as a profession? And I think I will stop with this one because this is a big one.
Mhm. So, our mission at the collective is that we want corporate social work to be a traditional path. Like, we don't want this to feel like a non-traditional career for social workers. And so we need to, educate our own community, educate corporations, hiring managers, recruiters. We need to evolve our social work education in our schools. We need to be having more of these conversations about, all the things that we're capable of as social workers. So, expanding our field placements and internships to go beyond, nonprofits or hospitals, but let's, get into corporations and, show people the magic of what a social worker can do.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. So I think as a profession, first of all, we need to just disavow the whole false dichotomy between micro and macro. All of us as social workers, we're always, I'm still using clinical skills. If I'm meeting with a client, I'm still using all the micro skills that I learned in school. And even though maybe I'm doing strategic planning or change management, something like that. So first of all, let's just get rid of that. But I think as a profession, we're in deep trouble. We've spent the last 30 or 40 years spending all our time defining what social work is, and public health and nursing have just raced past us. And they're using all the frameworks that social work has developed, going back to Jane Addams. So we need to reaffirm, and we need to retake our role as change agents, as community leaders, as people invested in social and economic justice. So we also need to rebel against this whole system of bureaucracy that's keeping most social workers tied to the desk doing paperwork instead of actually doing the things they invest in social work, which is working with clients and working with communities and vulnerable communities. So I think that yeah, we need to take some lessons from what teachers are doing in terms of unionizing, things like that. So I would like to, Alejandro will get this, have some ganas, to kind of take back our role in these communities and take back our profession, and then just celebrate each other wherever you are in social work. We're part of a community, and that's diverse like any community.
Yeah, I want to just add to that. So we've spent a great amount of time trying to compete with psychology, or trying to, like professionalize, and have kind of lost touch with those like real deep like community roots, and like the unions, and we decided to professionalize instead of unionize, and the DSM became our book rather than really focusing on what we're really, really good at. And this is not at all to say that the clinical aspect of our work is not valuable. It is, but it's not the only thing. So I'm really excited to see so many people having these conversations.
Also, the other thing I would like to add too is we are not doing a very good job of supporting our people, supporting the social workers within the field. I mean, it's no secret that we have such a high burnout rate, but like, what are we really doing about it? What kind of supports are we giving to each other? What kind of peer groups are we setting up for each other? So my vision for the social work industry is really an industry that we feel supported, that we have the tools that we need to be successful, that we are able to just, again, create those relationships that we really need to grow and to have these conversations and to be valued and to be able to effectively communicate the value that we bring in whatever setting that we're in. But it really goes back to just supporting our peers and our colleagues as social workers.
Okay, so I can give a whole TED talk about what I wish the social work profession could be, right? Like if I'm like thinking huge, like no limits, it would be like a social worker in like every different setting, right? Because we just have all the skills to solve problems. I'm like, man, if Congress members had social workers in their office,
Right.
like, you know, like you have to trickle down. And again, this is like my spiraling theory, right? Because like what Renee just said, that we're so focused sometimes in like our client, our one-on-one, right? Adding what Catherine was saying about burnout, that it's so hard for us to expand what we think will help, right? Like the reason why we're tied to work is because it's systems, it's policy, it's all tied to funding. So we need to funnel social workers into that so that we can kind of change it, and it has that trickle down effect, right? It can be not only that government thing, but just different companies that could just benefit, but we're just so tied to that, like, are we clinical macro, and kind of focus into that. So I think my passion is that I hope that like it has a trickle effect, right? That y'all will go talk to your networks and your people and just say like, hey, like we can do this, like we can expand and kind of heal. And ideally, it's actually some in my head, like some positions will disappear, right? Because we fix those broken systems and we can move on to like different themes to help people and systems function. Like, I don't even know if I'm making sense at this point. This is like me and my hype moment of like systems and visions, but I think it's that like that, and I think it starts from the schools, like the messaging that we're getting, kind of what Catherine was saying, like, oh, it's gonna suck, you're gonna burn out, you're gonna have low raise, like low pay, like it's going to be really hard, it's going to be really stressful, and then you go into these fields thinking like you're limited to these jobs that are like toxic and burning out and causing trauma, right? So I think is that we restructure what social work looks like within schools, and then from there have these stronger social workers that are not only working on the ground but working in the systems. And like even recently we were just talking about at work about like evidence-based practices and how they're not like even culturally competent to what we were doing, right? Those are systems that social workers can be changing and doing and creating. So there's just different avenues to doing it, but I think collectively we just all need to think together. And I agree with Renee, like we have to work on our reputation as social workers and that value, and it's hard when we're going against systems that don't see it that way. And it's not impossible, like he said, like nurses are just like a great example, like how they're so respectable, like, you know, when people become nurses and things. And mind you, like I firmly believe that, but I think we should have that respect too. And then it isn't until like our mentors and our professors and as a collective we respect ourselves that we'll be able to then expand into that. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to really echo that. Most of these talks that we have at the council are events that I wish that we had in grad school. You know, these are events that the conversations that I did not have, and I did not, you know, I had to burn out to figure it out, right? That I'm really hoping that social workers, students are currently in school, they can benefit from these conversations, and we can really change that trajectory.
Yeah, and to add to that, that's literally where it starts. Like I know when I was in school, like my professor for our policy class, like I ran for a neighborhood council and I like got elected, and then I was able to apply what I was learning in a macro setting of like, oh, people don't know how to express feelings, or oh, like think like collectively. And that's when you start connecting those dots of like, oh wait, my skills are transferable. So like if we're getting these like new batch of social workers that are going into schools and learning that, then I think we're setting that pipeline where like social workers are not burning out, and then also like just elevating the profession.
The chat right now is just so rich. I can't, you know, read everything and pay attention at the same time, but it is a really, really rich chat, and I'm so excited that this conversation is happening. We are at the 7 o'clock, so the next 30 minutes I'm going to dedicate to the questions that folks have. I copy pasted some of them, so I'll just, you know, I'm sorry, folks, if I missed your question. We're going to get to as many as we can. So the first question that I wrote down is, could you address how you were able to manage the imposter syndrome right out of grad school, if applicable? I know we come with a plethora of skills, but it is hard to feel comfortable in allowing those skills to go to work. Yeah, so if you guys want to address that.
I think
I would-
this is Catherine here. First, having imposter syndrome is normal. Anytime you go into a new situation, you're going to feel like, oh my gosh, am I doing a good job? Do I really belong here? Especially if you are just new to the entire situation. And then even more so now, I've heard conversations from our graduating college students that during the pandemic, during Zoom University, they don't really feel like they got a great education or like they were able to really work on their skills. So having grace for yourself and even listing out, for me, I've had to list out my qualifications, my accomplishments to remind myself of how other people see me and all of the things that I have done, because a lot of times we can get in our heads and say, oh, I wish we were so much better. I wish I was farther along, whatever it is. But reminding yourself that, yes, you have accomplished a lot and you do deserve to be in that seat.
Mhm. Yeah, it's, I tell myself this, I tell my kids, I just told my friend who started a new job, but like, we can't be good at something new when we first do it, you know? And so we kind of have to fake it till we make it. Like, just be confident that you know yourself, you know your value, and that, yeah, it's okay to sit in that discomfort of being, you know, in a new situation. And then we kind of just, yeah, have to, yeah, fake it till you make it. You know, and I think it takes 6 months to a year, I think, to really feel confident in a brand new space, new role, whatever it is. So yeah, give yourself grace.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would
and
just,
I would add, I have like
Right.
a hype group, right? Like that we message back and forth, like I'm experiencing this, like and that imposter syndrome and throwing it back. And sometimes, again, my macro brain, recognizing that sometimes you're going into systems that weren't built for you, right? As like a female, or for me, like as a Latina, like what it just wasn't built that way. So obviously I'm going to feel that way because these systems are created to have like pushed us out. So it's a lot of like being able to push in and then having that support system that just kind of making sure that you're working through those emotions. And it happens, right? As we continue to grow, it's scary and going into something that's completely new. So it's just a matter of like setting up those systems to be a continuous reminder. And you know, like going to therapy, like that helps. That helps me, right? Like where is that coming from? And I need to process that from my own traumas, and that's where my imposter syndrome sometimes is showing up too.
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's, you know, if you're a person of color, it's internalized racism, it's internalized oppression, that whole imposter syndrome. Like Jennifer said, just leave it behind, you know, fake it till you make it. There's actually scholastic research on this. It shows that when kids are seeing a video, an inspiring video of someone they identify with, their scores go up by over 62%. So, yeah, I like listening to powerful music that inspires me. You know, a good movie, something like that. Yeah, and then, I mean, I treat that, you know, I still feel that sense of you know, intimidation sometimes. I just facilitated a retreat for a bunch of Hollywood mogul types, and it was like, and I didn't read their bios on purpose because I didn't want to know how important they were, and that helped. But it was, but you know, yeah, I just fall back on those messages that encourage you, have people around you that support you, that believe in you, create friends, you know, meditate, mindfulness, rest, all those good things.
So I want to address it, something that keeps coming up is folks are asking for specific job titles, or they're asking like, I'm interested in this, how do I get into this? Instead of asking those questions one by one, I will say again that every single person, every single panelist here, they put their links in the chat. And if you go on their website, or if you go on their, you know, like the corporate social workers, or if you go to the social changer, if you go to the RISE directory, if you go to Renee's LinkedIn, like you will see like so many resources about the specifics of like how, you know, and also other future events that will address like questions around like specific job titles, or like how do I market myself to different, you know, settings or things like that. So I'm not gonna ask those questions because it's going to just take a lot of time. And
If I may,
yeah.
if I may just really quickly on that. So a lot of that is our training, right? We tend to be kind of rigid. Don't think of it as job titles. Look at the job description and look at the competencies required for the job, right? So all of you have taken advanced policy, you've taken management and leadership, you've taken, you know, a lot of these things. So fall back on the competencies. Don't get locked up in job titles. And believe me, a lot of the competencies you'll see, you're ready to take them on.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you, Renee, you already mentioned having a mission and like really knowing what your passions and interests are first before you look into titles. But there were some questions around like how to specifically talk to recruiters, or how to, you know, like what keywords to search and things like that. And I think those questions are probably better addressed in the resources than in this setting. Okay, so I'm going to ask some of the more kind of wider, more open questions. Let's see. There are a lot of gratitudes coming in. Thank yous to you guys. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, I think Adam puts, in order to get social workers into the design space where influential decisions are being made, it seems like there's a need to get them into the financial capacity to do so. Would need to be something along the lines of a trauma-informed investor circle. In this space, strategies could be created and profit could be defined using the data your industry tracks. What do you think would attract social workers to this form of macro work?
So if I may, I'm really glad you picked out this question because I saw Adam's question earlier and I was so intrigued by it. So first of all, I'm a Mexican American from Northeast LA. My father painted cars for 30 years, right? I don't come from wealth, and I've never attached capital to wealth. And most of us as social workers, you know, we're women, we're people of color, you know. I teach a class I have 4 formerly incarcerated students in my class. So it's like the idea to me of, I get it. Okay, so anyway, I just want to say that I don't think that social capital necessarily comes from wealth capital. And our power as social workers is, again, has been said on the panel, is our emotional capacity, our ability to network and build influence. That said, okay, there are models like B corporations. Of course, there's impact investing now. There's many ways to use capital for good. Many corporations are looking at that, and social workers, I think, in a perfect position to fulfill those jobs.
And I think the way to attract it, again, it's like that education piece, right? Like really expanding people's mind. Like, I think I had that opportunity where I took a social work consulting class, and then it really challenged us to see how we were applying immediately those clinical and macro skills to invest and do all these kind of things. And I think it's a summary of what we were just talking about, how like we are trauma informed. There's so much of that need. And so how much are we making out of that? And, you know, my phrase that I completely hate, it's like, oh, I'm in it for the, not for the income, I'm in it for the outcome. It's like, no, like we could do both things.
Right.
Like I think helping build others their wealth, right? Like, cause sometimes it does feel like icky, like, oh, I went into social work to help people and like me making money off of it. Like, does that mean like I'm not being ethical or I'm not helping people enough? But it's like, maybe how are we helping others along, right? Like if I'm in a very corporate setting and I feel like I'm kind of selling my soul, right? Then what is the other things that I'm doing to kind of help bring people up to that level as well, right? And I think as social workers, we naturally think that way, right? In the spaces that we come in, like how do we make this equitable? How are we making it people collectively together? And so I think that's where sometimes that messaging needs to be a little bit different so that people can open up their minds within social work to be able to go into these different fields and opportunities.
Yeah, I had so much guilt going into the corporate world at first, like in my mid-20s, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I like a sellout? And, but I made like double what I made like as a therapist. And, my income has just increased. And it's like, yeah, I need to pay my student loans, like that's the reality. But yeah, we can help people wherever we are and whatever our interests are, in finance or whatever. Yes, like in this society, a certain level of wealth gives us power, and that buying power can help inform economies and whatever. And so I think who says it, like, with great response, great, I can't even think of the saying, but
Great
like
power comes
yes,
great responsibility.
yes, thank you very much. I'm terrible with those sayings, but yeah, like and because we are ethics based, because we are values based, we should be in the White House, we should be at the corporate board table, like everywhere, helping to inform. We should be making economic decisions. So
Thank you guys for that. I think you guys have touched on this, but I want to bring this up again because I'm, so many of our events are for social work students so that they can have a better path moving forward. And Caitlin writes, I'm in the first year of my MSW program right now. Do y'all have any tips or advice for going into the social work field? My professors have all told us about the high level of burnout, which has kind of scared me. And this makes me so sad because that is not what we want for you.
I remember getting those warnings from my professors, and they would say, oh, don't be one of those burnt out social workers. But that was it. They really didn't tell us like what it was, how to prevent it, how to do effective self-care. So, I mean, for my tips, what I wish I would have known in grad school is to start doing that self-care now, because there's been studies where social work students who are doing internships have an extremely high level of burnout. So a lot of students may already be burnt out, but they don't realize it. They're in survival mode right now. They're just trying to get through week to week, try to get through the next semester, so that when they go into their job, they're still in the survival mode and it never ends, because they're, again, just trying to get through this client, trying to get through the week. And that's the habits that they're forming. So if you're a student right now, or for anybody, really just look up mindfulness and practice some mindfulness tips on how are you feeling and what are ways that we can set boundaries, learn to say no to things that aren't serving us, no to things that aren't our priorities right now, and really start practicing that, because the longer you get in this field, the harder it is going to be, and the more people are going to be looking at you to show up, to like solve their problems. There's always going to be someone needing help, but you really need to focus on you first. And that is easier said than done. But you just got to give it a try and do your best, every day. It's not perfect, but.
I also want to add to that I think people get scared when they go into a job and find out that it's toxic, and it's okay to leave. Like, it's okay. Like, I think sometimes we feel like we need to, like, kind of help Renee, because I had that mentality too, right? Like, I can change the system from within, like, gun ho, like, right? But sometimes these systems aren't set for you to succeed, right? Like the amount of caseloads, the amount of productivity, like, and again, that's policy and funding, and this is why we have like productivity. So it's okay that it can be scary that you interview and it seems like a great job, and then you jump in and you're like, no, right? Because some of these organizations are thriving off of that cycle of new therapists coming in, and they're just like kind of cycling them through. So it's just being okay to know your worth and like protect yourself, and being able to like peace out and find somewhere else that's will help you thrive.
I want to address like this idea that social workers need to be poor, and all these professors that are telling us these things. It's so frustrating. Like, no, like we need to fight the system and say, no, essential workers are essential. You don't need to be poor. We need to pay teachers. We need to pay nurses. We need to pay firefighters. We need to pay social workers, and we need to, come together collectively and say, no, like we demand better pay. We need to get social workers in those positions, like you said, in government to help make the decisions. We need to elevate all essential workers. And we know that after the pandemic showed us that too. But like, let's not believe the lie in the scarcity mentality that like, if we're helping people, we should be poor. No, I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, it's like seeing ourselves like clients, right? Like
Yeah.
social work as a profession and a hierarchy of needs, right? Like
Yeah.
Catherine saying we need to soothe and take care of ourselves, but also changing those environments to kind of help us. So I'm trying to translate those clinical skills into macro skills as visuals so y'all can understand kind of how like it's of various different parts that need to come together so that we can thrive in other settings too.
Yeah, and I've just been hearing stories about how, social workers are making like, a penny more than the people that they are, serving. And it's like, we shouldn't have to be right close to that poverty line. Like, no. Oh, and just, yeah, don't get me started on teachers. They deserve so much money for teaching on Zoom for 2 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful discussions in the chat happening, kind of echoing some of what's been saying and other thoughts as well. So I really love this discussion. I think we have time maybe for 2 more questions. Someone asked, did you always imagine yourself being a social worker?
I didn't know what it was. And this is like a really funny, true story, but I went to college, whatever day, and I saw the list of professions or, degrees. And I'm like, social work. I'm like, I'm social and I have to work. And I know it sounds super corny, but I feel like social work found me because when I started taking those classes the first year, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect profession education for me. So I am so grateful that it found me and that I picked it for the corniest reason. But it is a fabulous, fabulous education and profession. And I'm so grateful.
Yeah, for me, I kind of like Renee said, right? Like finding my mission. I always knew I wanted to give back to my community. And for a hot second, I thought it was going to be as a doctor. And that didn't work out, right? A medical doctor. And then I took a gang intervention class as an undergrad, and it was a social work class. And my professor at the time was like bringing police and gang members to talk, and the police officer was in class, and he's like, you guys probably never heard of this area, but Cypress Park, like there's like all these gangs. And I'm like sitting there, right, in a class where there's like not a lot of Latinos, and obviously the Latina in class was like, I actually know where it is because like I'm from there. And so that, and volunteering at Homeboy Industries at the same time, like that's when I was like, ooh, community in needs, and how I had all these like protective factors that helped me get into like a great university, and like my community was not at that stage. And so I think that's what like funneled into social work, and I love it.
I'll share a brief story on that. So I was working at D.D. Hirsch Community Mental Health Center, and every Friday we'd have a interdisciplinary training team meeting. It'd be the psychiatrists, the social workers, psychologists, and I always loved the questions the social workers were asking. And that's when I knew I wanted to be a social worker. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist, but when I saw the social workers asking about the environment and asking about the family and the system, I was like, okay, this is, I need to explore this. So yeah, and I wanted to just talk about, I'm in this short debate with Adam on the chat here, but just thinking again that, yeah, you don't need to be an equity investor to build affordable housing or be involved in it. I just helped to build a $54 million, 120 unit affordable housing complex. I don't I'm not an equity investor. I don't have wealthy friends, but I know how to write grants and I know how to work with philanthropists. So I think as social workers, what we recognize is we use our clinical skills and our skills of influence and engagement, our emotional intelligence to work with people of wealth and power. And that's how we change systems. I don't have to be in every system in order to change it. In fact, it's stronger almost being outside of it.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's making sure that you're networking outside of the social work world, right? Because then that's how, like, how can I as a social worker and you working in real estate, or you being a doctor, or you working in a graphic design organization, like how do we work together and share those skills to be able to grow in like non-traditional settings as well? I found that that has been like highly successful too.
Thank you, guys. Someone asked about salary negotiations, and I'm just going to plug our next events, which will be just about job searching and negotiating and benefits and all that stuff. So we're going to leave that question for another time. So another person's going to is asking, I'm a first-year MSW student with an interest in corporate social work and other macro areas. I'm transitioning from another career. How necessary is direct practice work and experience to inform the social work in the corporate social work role? I don't want to chase macro level work and accidentally skip over micro experiences that are grounding for the long term. I know that Renee wants us to get rid of the dichotomy altogether, but just, you know, given how we're trained and given how the social work schools kind of push you in one area or another, you guys want to address that?
I don't think it's necessary. I was kind of wondering this myself. I was only in the direct practice or micro space for a very short time. Like my graduate concentration was in macro. Undergrad, I took business classes, you know, criminal justice. Like I was always very, like, my favorite class was, you know, community and organizations. So I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I will always, you know, value the short, you know, year and a half I spent as a therapist. It confirmed that it wasn't for me. You know, I think it's, you know, fine. I've had so many different jobs, so I just encourage to say yes, to stay curious, and then to do things like outside of your day job that also bring you joy. I think somebody was saying this too, like, you know, at my current day job, like I'm hosting a Brene Brown book club because it brings me joy, and I can do these extracurricular activities, and I'm facilitating this really special time. And then, you know, and you have to do things that bring you joy. And I don't think it has to be micro, macro, whatever. Just do what you love, and you know, follow your curiosity.
Yeah, and along those lines, I mean, so we're all, right, if you know our code of ethics, it's at whatever role you're at, we have a role to fight for social justice. So again, that dichotomy is, I don't know how it gets embedded. I think that unfortunately anyway, for my MSW, we didn't even read the DSM. It wasn't even required. There wasn't even a class at the University of Washington that taught the DSM, and that was intentional. Because they want, you know, so you can learn the DSM, it's fine, but, you know, so yeah, I think, like Jennifer said, just continue to follow what's important to you. If you want to move into macro, I talk to micro practitioners daily because you guys are the experts. You know where challenges are moving, you know the trends. I teach a lot of my students, they're brilliant. I don't have those skills on the ground, but as macro practitioners, we use that data. So there's always a relationship there to take it to a systems level change.
Catherine or Alejandra, do you guys want to? No. All right, well, we have 5 minutes. Closing statements, folks, if you can each take a minute to, you know, share any last gems, or if you want to do a plug, that's totally fine too.
I'll start. feel like I kind of I think we just need to break out of some of these roles and think again about the unique skills that we bring to society, and then but never forget that these systems need changing. That we have to take care of our brothers and sisters in DCFS, on the front lines as well. So I'm not talking about completely retreating from those systems. For those of you who want to change systems as well, I think as Catherine and others have said, being entrepreneurial, creating other nonprofits or for-profits that demonstrate to the government sector what can be done with creativity and innovation.
It's Catherine, I'll go next. Just don't limit yourself to anything. I mean, even within what we talked about here, if you see needs that need to be met in areas that we haven't even touched on, go for it. I shared that list of job titles, but that is not all inclusive. We are constantly adding new job titles. I'm hearing of social workers in different industries and professions every single day. I'm still learning about what all is possible. So the sky is the limit. Do not hold yourself back. If there is a need that needs to be met, then go for it. Expect to be uncomfortable, expect to feel like an imposter, expect to have challenges. Because if you're not having challenges, then you're not trying to grow at all. You're just staying the same. We do have workshops that are coming up for clinical supervisors to support them and the social workers. So I'll put our next link in there in the chat, learning how to make your LinkedIn profile a profitable presence online.
Yeah, get a LinkedIn profile. I heard that a lot of social workers don't have them. And I would say, yeah, coming from the corporate space, like it's really important to network. And, for a long time, most of my network didn't include very many social workers, but now it really has expanded this past year. And it's been such an amazing journey to meet social workers, the ones that are hidden and the ones that are, sharing their credentials online. But yeah, we have in a couple of weeks a navigating the corporate world as a social worker. So we're going to be sharing tips on, learning business acumen and corporate culture, and just doing a compare and a contrast, and just giving people tips to just how to be, a proud social worker at a corporation. So yeah, please join us at the Corporate Social Work Collective.
And then as for me, same, really break down the stereotype of social work that we have within our profession, and knowing your value and your worth, and expanding that into whatever passion field that I'm sure there's a need for fixing or addressing a need. And same, my social work, my Instagram, I share a lot about meso macro work and kind of how to do that. I do offer a resume course and one-on-one resume where we do, it's specific to social work, and especially translating those clinical into macro social work. And I do power hours where I individually coach social workers that also want to pivot and assess barriers for that. But more than welcome, it's excited that next month is social work month, and we're celebrating at least ourselves, right? And our worth, or hopefully at least y'all get a pizza party as a recognition, right? But hopefully we'll change that together. And so hopefully y'all are inspired today from listening to all of us, because I'm re-energized to continue, the good fight. So thank y'all for having me.
Everyone share?
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, thank you so much.
Final statement.
I got no, I am just blown away by all of you. I got nothing other than thank you all so much for attending. Thank you all so much for having us on a Friday night.
Yeah, one final word from me. As Catherine said, expect to be uncomfortable, but please don't expect to burn out. That should not be the expectation or the path. And that's what we're trying to prevent here.
Right.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank
Have a
you
good
all.
weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.